Clayton Reeves thought he was simply bringing his son home, but the bloodied woman lying in the dust ahead was about to upend everything he thought he knew about his wife's death. The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly that October afternoon in 1882, casting long, wavering shadows on the trail as Clayton's wagon creaked steadily toward the only place that had ever felt like home. 3-year-old Tommy sat beside him, giggling as he made his wooden toy horse dance across his lap, something Clayton had carved. During their 3-day journey to Tucson, the sound of his laughter, so light and full of life, still startled Clayton. Sometimes, after 3 years of raising the boy alone, joy felt like something borrowed, not owned. Clayton's rough, calloused hands tightened on the reins as they neared familiar ground. He spotted the jagged red rocks, the gnarled mesquite tree twisted by the wind. They were close now, close to the small house where Sarah's shawl still hung by the door, where her Bible remained undisturbed on the kitchen table, where her scent lingered in the hallway like a fading echo. But something ahead caught his eye. A motionless shape lay sprawled across the trail, female, dark hair fanned across the sand like ink spilled on parchment. Clayton's heart skipped. He pulled the wagon to a halt so abruptly that Tommy dropped his horse with a clatter. Clayton leapt down, boots hitting the ground with a thud. He hurried toward the woman, already dreading what he might find. Her dress pale blue and torn was stained with blood. Kneeling beside her, he saw her eyelids flutter weakly, and then he saw her eyes vivid green, startling against her dust-covered skin. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, her breaths ragged, shallow. Next to her, wrapped in a ragged piece of cloth, a newborn whimpered softly, barely loud enough to be heard over the breeze. The woman's hand clutched his shirt with a surprising force, her lips moving without sound. Clayton leaned closer, catching the metallic scent of blood mingled with something strangely familiar, like the herbs Sarah used to grow beside the window. At last, a whisper, barely audible, but it hit him like a hammer. Sarah Reeves. Clayton froze. The air seemed to drain from his lungs. His wife's name, his dead wife's name, spoken by a dying stranger in the desert. He tried to speak, to ask how she knew Sarah, but before the words could leave his mouth, the woman tightened her grip and choked out one final sentence. She didn't die from. Her voice collapsed. Her hand fell away. Her eyes lost their light. Clayton knelt in the dust, surrounded by the silence of the dead and the soft cries of a baby who now had no one except him. And in that moment, everything he had believed about his wife's death began to crumble. He stared at the woman's face, pale and still. If Sarah didn't die from childbirth, as Doc Henderson had said, then what had truly taken her? The story he'd lived with for 3 long years, complications during delivery, now felt like a cruel fabrication, a lie cloaked in a doctor's authority. The infant cried louder, jolting him from his thoughts. Clayton reached out with trembling hands and gathered the child gently into his arms. The moment their skin touched, something within him cracked. He remembered holding Tommy for the first time, so small, so helpless, while the doctor explained that Sarah hadn't survived the birth. But now he wondered what else that doctor hadn't said. As he shifted the baby against his chest, Clayton noticed something, a scrap of paper, pinned to the cloth. He carefully unfolded it with one hand, the other cradling the infant. The handwriting was faint, shaky. 3 words, "Find Dr. Henderson." His breath caught. The same man who had delivered Tommy, the man who had placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Sometimes God takes the mother to save the child." The man who had sworn there was nothing he could have done. But now a dying woman, a stranger, had sent him straight to that very man. A low, rhythmic thudding reached Clayton's ears. Hoofbeats coming fast. He turned toward the horizon, eyes narrowing against the sun. 3 riders, dust curled in their wake. Their silhouettes grew clearer with every second, even from a distance. Clayton saw the metal glint of sheriff's badges. They were riding hard. The child in his arms began to wail, as if sensing the danger. Tommy moved to his father's side, his small body pressed against Clayton's leg. The wooden horse lay forgotten in the sand. The riders reached him and reined in their horses, stirring up a cloud of dust. Sheriff Ben McKenzie swung down first, hand already resting on his holster. Clayton had known Ben for years. They'd played cards, shared whiskey, even prayed together after Sarah died. But today, Ben's eyes held no friendship. "Clayton Reeves," he called, voice sharp. "Step away from that baby." Clayton instinctively pulled the infant closer. "Sheriff, she's dead," he said, gesturing to the woman. "I just found her here with this child." I said, "Step away." Mackenzie's fingers hovered near his gun. The two deputies behind him spread out, their faces unreadable. Clayton's heart pounded. Tommy clung tighter to his leg. Nothing about this felt right. "Ben, what is this?" She said Sarah's name before she died. My wife's name. How could she know that? The sheriff's jaw clenched, his gaze flickering briefly to the dead woman. That woman was a thief and a killer. And that baby? That child belongs to someone important, someone who wants it back. Clayton looked down at the baby in his arms, then back at the lifeless woman. A thief, a murderer, that same woman who had used her dying breath to reveal a secret about his wife, who had held his shirt like it was her last anchor to the world. No, there was more to this. Much more. And Clayton Reeves had just stepped into a truth people were willing to kill for. ***. Clayton whispered his wife's name with a heaviness that clung to his chest like iron. "She was dying when I found her," he said, voice low, heart pounding. She couldn't have hurt anyone. "You calling me a liar, Clayton?" The accusation cut through the dry air like a blade. The baby stirred in Clayton's arms, those tiny fingers reaching into the nothingness, so innocent, so helpless. The very thought that someone wanted to harm this child twisted Clayton's stomach. "I'm not calling you anything," he said, voice carefully even. "But I won't hand over a baby to men who won't tell me why they want her." Deputy Wells, barely more than a boy in a deputy's badge, stepped forward. "Sir, we have orders to bring that child back. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Orders from who? Clayton's mind darted to the note he'd found tucked inside the baby's blanket. "Find Dr. Henderson." That name again, the same man who had lied about Sarah's death. The same man who now appeared connected to the dying woman in the dust and her final breath. "What if I say no?" Clayton asked, the words leaving his mouth in a whisper so sharp it might have drawn blood. Sheriff Mackenzie's hand slid to rest on his gun. "Then you're obstructing an investigation, and I'll have to arrest you." Clayton glanced down at Tommy. His son's eyes, Sarah's eyes, gazed up at him, wide with confusion, trust, and fear. That was when it clicked. Sarah hadn't died from childbirth. No, she had been killed. Just like the woman bleeding out in the desert dirt. The baby in his arms wasn't just a mystery. She was the key. A truth someone was willing to kill to keep buried. Clayton made his choice. "Then I guess you'll have to shoot me, Ben, because I'm not giving you this baby until someone tells me the truth about what happened to my wife." A silence, brittle and ready to snap, stretched between Clayton and the three men. "Sheriff." Mackenzie's hand stayed on the gun, his knuckles white against the grip. Only the soft breaths of the baby stirred the stillness. "You're making a mistake, Clayton," Mackenzie said, his voice like dry gravel. "Bigger than you know. The only mistake I made was trusting this town," Clayton said, each word now heavy with rising fury. "Trusting that my wife died naturally. Trusting that a badge meant a man was decent." Deputy Wells shifted beside the sheriff. His nervous eyes bounced from one man to the other. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Wells." Mackenzie never took his eyes off Clayton. "You don't know what you're stepping into, Reeves. This isn't just about Sarah, it's bigger." But Clayton wasn't listening anymore, because the baby's sleeve had fallen back slightly, and on the tiny wrist was a small, heart-shaped birthmark. Just like Sarah's. The world reeled. This wasn't just any child, and the woman who had died in the dust hadn't just known Sarah's name by chance. This child was family. Clayton's thoughts surged, crashing over each other like thunderclaps. Sarah had always claimed she was an only child, orphaned young. No siblings, no cousins, no extended kin. She'd said that, but she'd lied. The baby's birthmark proved it. "She's related to Sarah," Clayton whispered, as if saying it aloud would make it less terrifying. Mackenzie went pale. "Clayton, don't." "She had a sister," Clayton said, louder now, the pieces falling like jagged shards into a puzzle he never even knew existed. "And someone killed her to hide it." Tommy tugged gently at his leg. "Papa, why are the men angry? If you were Clayton, what would you do? Would you trust the sheriff who now stood with his hand on a weapon, aimed not just at you but at the child in your arms and the son by your side? Or would you protect the baby who might be the last living thread connecting you to the truth? Because what Clayton decided next would decide everything. Deputy Wells stepped forward again. His voice cracked under the weight of what he'd just heard. "Sheriff, if what he's saying is true, it's not true." Mackenzie's voice cracked like a whip. "Wells, you're green. You don't know what you're saying." But it was too late. Clayton saw it, the uncertainty blooming in the young deputy's eyes. And where there was doubt, there was a chance. Clayton turned to the dead woman once more. He memorized her face. The resemblance to Sarah was unmistakable, the same dark hair, the same bone structure that had once made his heart stop. Why had Sarah hidden this? Why would she lie about having a sister? The baby squirmed in his arms, and Clayton bent low, whispering a promise to that tiny, trembling life. "I'll find out what happened to your mother and mine." Mackenzie's gun finally lifted from its holster, the muzzle catching the desert sun, casting a cold gleam like a blade. Time crawled. His finger inched toward the trigger. Tommy pressed into his father's leg, sensing danger in ways words couldn't explain. "Please, Ben," Clayton said. He didn't tremble, even if fear was clawing inside him. "Whatever they've offered you, whatever they've threatened you with, it's not worth killing a man in front of his child." For a moment, just a flicker, something cracked in Mackenzie's eyes. Shame, guilt. The gun shook. "You think I what?" "This," Mackenzie whispered. "You think I've slept it all these past 3 years without seeing Sarah's face?" Clayton's lungs froze. "You were there." Mackenzie nodded, shoulders buckling under the weight of the truth. "I was supposed to protect her," he choked. "But Doc Henderson, he said it was the only way. That if we didn't, more people would die." Deputy Wells took a step back, his young face pale as chalk. "Sheriff, what are you talking about?" But Clayton didn't hear him. He was locked on Mackenzie's trembling confession. "Do what, Ben?" Clayton demanded. "What did Henderson make you do?" The baby began to cry loud, sorrowful, as if it knew how close they all were to something that could never be undone. Mackenzie flinched like he'd been shot. The gun dipped. "Sarah found out," he said, the words dragging themselves from his throat. "She found out about the adoption ring. Henderson was selling babies, telling poor women their babies had died, then shipping them east to rich families for thousands." Clayton couldn't breathe. His wife hadn't just stumbled into danger. She'd been fighting it. She was trying to blow the lid off everything. She was going to tell, Mackenzie went on, his voice now broken glass and grief. She was going to expose the whole thing. Henderson said if she did, it would ruin this town. Said it was better this way, for everyone, for the children. "So you let him kill her." "Henderson did it. Made it look like childbirth complications. He choked. "I just helped cover it up." Deputy Wells stepped forward. "That's murder." "Sheriff," Clayton's grip tightened around the baby, Sarah's sister's child. This little girl was supposed to be another victim, stolen and sold, just like Tommy would have been, if Sarah hadn't found out. "This woman," Clayton said, nodding to the body in the sand. "She knew. That's why she came to me. She was trying to warn me." Mackenzie gave a slow, shamed nod. "Yes." Rebecca Hartwell, Sarah's younger sister, had been searching for her for 3 long years, ever since Sarah vanished from Denver, without a trace. When Rebecca finally followed the trail here and uncovered the truth, Henderson had her silenced. He didn't dirty his own hands. He hired others to do it. But Rebecca didn't die easily. She escaped at first, making it this far before they caught up with her again. Mackenzie's gun lowered at last, his trembling fingers slack. "That baby," he said hoarsely, "it's Rebecca's daughter. Henderson planned to take her tonight." A fire ignited in Clayton's chest, an all-consuming, protective fury. This child, this tiny, helpless girl, was his blood. She was Tommy's cousin, the last living piece of Sarah. His heart clenched with a ferocity he hadn't felt since the day he buried his wife. "Where's Henderson now?" Clayton asked, his voice low and cold as a winter wind. "At his clinic," Wells answered before Mackenzie could find his voice. waiting for us to deliver the baby. Clayton looked down at his son, then to the infant in his arms, and finally to the two lawmen, one young and burning with conviction, the other grizzled and drowning in remorse. The decision before him was simple but perilous. Walk away, keep Tommy safe, and let Henderson's evil fester, or rise up and fight for justice, no matter the cost. But the moment his eyes landed on the tiny, heart-shaped birthmark on the baby's wrist, Clayton knew the decision had already been made. It had been made the moment Sarah stood her ground 3 years ago. Now it was his turn to finish what she had started. He turned to Mackenzie. "Ben, you're going to help me end this," he said, each word laced with purpose. "Or Wells is going to arrest you for murder." Mackenzie's shoulders drooped, defeat written across his face. "Henderson's got men, dangerous ones. If you go to that clinic, you may not come back, and Tommy will lose another parent." Clayton looked at his son, who clutched his wooden horse, eyes wide and searching. "And if I don't go," he said, "how many more children will Henderson steal? How many more women have to die?" He carefully handed the infant to Wells. "Deputy, take both children and ride straight to the church. Tell Pastor Williams everything if I don't return by sunset. You make sure the whole town knows the truth about Doc Henderson." Wells nodded, the gravity of his task etched into his young face. Clayton turned to Mackenzie. "You're coming with me. You owe Sarah that much." The sheriff gave a stiff nod and holstered his weapon, hands unsteady with guilt. Clayton knelt in front of Tommy, heart shattering at the innocence in his son's blue eyes. "Papa has to go help some people, little man," he said softly. "You're going to stay with the deputy and the baby for a little while, all right?" Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you coming back, Papa?" The question struck Clayton like a hammer to the chest. Sarah had never gotten to say goodbye to their son. She'd never seen him take his first steps, or smile with a mouth full of missing teeth. And now Clayton faced the same possibility that he'd leave and never return. "I'm going to try my best," he said, voice thick. "And if I don't..." He gently took the wooden horse from Tommy's hands and pressed it back into his palm. "You keep this, and remember that your mama and Papa loved you more than anything in this world." Tommy's lip quivered, but he nodded with quiet bravery. Clayton rose and climbed onto his wagon. Mackenzie mounted beside him. As they rolled toward town, the baby's cries echoed behind them, soft, plaintive wails that reminded Clayton of Tommy's first breaths. That had been the night Sarah died. The clinic emerged on the horizon, a modest building that had welcomed life into the world for decades, now steeped in corruption and death. Smoke rose from the chimney. Henderson was inside, no doubt preparing for another night of deceit and cruelty. "He keeps records," Mackenzie said as they neared. "Names, dates, families who bought the babies. Sarah found it the night she..." He trailed off, Clayton's jaw clenched. "Then that's what we're here for." But as they reached the clinic's edge, something made Clayton's blood run cold. 3 horses tied out front. Henderson wasn't alone. Clayton counted again. 3 horses, plus Henderson, for men. And all he had was a broken sheriff whose courage had only just begun to stir. "Who are they?" he asked in a hushed voice. Mackenzie's face turned ashen. "Henderson's men. The same bastards who killed Rebecca." The clinic's front door hung ajar. Voices floated out into the still desert air. Clayton could make out Henderson's smooth, practiced tone, the same voice that had welcomed babies into the world and coldly lied about Sarah's death. "I told you to bring me that baby an hour ago," Henderson was saying. "Maybe Reeves gave him trouble," a rougher voice replied. "Want us to ride out and check?" Clayton's heart seized. If those men rode out now, they'd find Wells and the children. Tommy would be in danger. "We go in now," Clayton whispered. Mackenzie shook his head furiously. "Clayton, they'll kill us. These aren't deputies. They're hired killers." "Then we die trying," Clayton replied, voice like iron. "Unless you'd rather live with another 3 years of guilt." Something changed in Mackenzie's eyes, a flicker of something long buried, but not entirely dead. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the echo of the man he used to be. But in that moment, he nodded. Not because he believed they'd survive, but because he knew they had no right not to try. Clayton straightened, fingers tightening around the grip of his gun with a steadiness born of purpose. Sarah had been a good woman, strong, kind, and undeserving of the fate she'd met. She deserved justice, not silence. Clayton nodded at Mackenzie, his own pistol checked and ready. She deserved the truth, he said. And so does every family in this town that's been fed lies about their children. They approached the clinic's front door, each step a descent into either justice or death. Clayton couldn't help but picture Tommy's innocent face, the baby girl with Sarah's birthmark, and the countless families torn apart by Henderson's. Cold ambition through a thin crack in the door. Clayton caught a glimpse of Henderson, tall, polished, silver hair gleaming under the lamp, the same hands that had delivered Tommy and taken Sarah's life. Reeves is becoming a problem, Henderson said, voice cold and clipped. If Mackenzie can't shut him down, we may have to wipe out the whole family. The whole family. Even Tommy. Clayton's blood turned to fire. He wanted to kick down the door and shoot Henderson where he stood. But Sarah's voice echoed in his mind, calm, determined. She had been methodical, gathering evidence to expose the truth. He had to honor her legacy, not waste a dot from inside. Papers rustled. Henderson was moving through files, maybe the very ones Mackenzie had mentioned, the proof Clayton needed. Every stolen child, every grieving mother, every lie wrapped in a birth certificate or death notice. One of Henderson's men muttered, "What if Reeves already knows? What if that woman told him before she died?" Henderson chuckled. Cold and sure of himself, Rebecca Hartwell took a bullet to the lung. She barely had breath to cry out, let alone talk. And even if she did say something, who would believe Reeves? I've been this town's doctor for 20 years, his word against mine. Clayton gritted his teeth. Henderson was right without something concrete. No one would believe a grieving husband over a respected doctor. But the records, they could change everything. We're going for the safe, Clayton whispered. You create a distraction. I'll circle round back. Mackenzie nodded, something firm in his expression that hadn't been there in years. Maybe the lawman he used to be still lived under the dust of compromise. Clayton slipped around the building's rear. Henderson's words followed him like a curse. After tonight, this whole mess disappears, including Clayton Reeves and his boy. He reached for the back door. It opened without a sound. Inside, the clinic smelled of alcohol and something sharper, something that reminded him too much of the night Tommy was born, of Sarah's blood and pain. He shoved the memory aside and crept across the wooden floor. The medicine cabinet stood exactly where Mackenzie had said. Behind it, hidden in the wall, was the safe. From the front room came Mackenzie's voice. Doc, we got a problem. Reeves is asking questions about his wife. What kind of questions? Henderson snapped, suspicion sharp in his tone. Says, the dying woman told him something, Mackenzie said. Clayton tugged gently at the cabinet, revealing the small iron safe embedded in the wood. His fingers trembled as he turned the combination dial. What code would Henderson use? Sarah's birthday, no. Tommy's, still no. Then instinct guided him. He tried the date Sarah had died. October 15th, 79. The lock clicked. Inside were thick stacks of papers, ledgers, letters, financial records, names, prices, destinations. A horrifying archive of stolen lives. At the very bottom, folded with care, was a letter in Sarah's handwriting. Clayton's breath caught. He unfolded it with trembling hands. It was dated the day before her death. My beloved Clayton, if you're reading this, Henderson has killed me for what I found. He's been stealing babies, telling mothers they died, then selling them. Tommy was meant to be next, but I discovered the truth in time. I've hidden the evidence. Make sure no more mothers are robbed of their children. Make the truth known. All my love, always. Sarah, grief surged through Clayton, nearly buckling his knees. Sarah hadn't died giving life, she'd died saving lives. She had died a hero. Reeves. Henderson's voice roared from the front room. I know you're in here. Clayton stuffed the papers and Sarah's letter into his jacket and turned. Henderson stood in the doorway, gun pointed directly at him. You should have walked away, he said. Eyes hard. You and that boy of yours, both of you could have lived. Before Henderson could fire, a voice rang out behind him. Drop it, Doc. It's over. Sheriff Mackenzie stood there, weapon raised, backed by Wells and a handful of town deputies. A shot rang out, then another and another. When the smoke cleared, Henderson lay sprawled on the floor, lifeless. His men were disarmed, stunned, and cuffed. Mackenzie lowered his pistol slowly, his face pale but resolved. Clayton stood in the silence, Sarah's letter pressed against his heart, the weight of her sacrifice settling fully on his shoulders. She had died to protect Tommy, to stop a monster, and she had succeeded. 3 months later, Clayton stood at the cemetery with Tommy's small hand in his. Beside Sarah's grave was a fresh stone, Rebecca Hartwell, finally laid to rest beside the sister she had died trying to save. In Clayton's other arm, the baby girl slept peacefully. Sarah Rebecca Reeves, named for the 2 women who had given everything for her. Tommy, already fond of his new cousin, had plans to teach her everything he knew: how to fish, how to ride, how to be brave. 23 children were returned to their birth families, those who had unknowingly adopted stolen babies were shattered, but thankful to finally know the truth. The town had been built on lies, but now it stood on something firmer: justice. Clayton found peace in fatherhood again, raising 2 children in the light of truth instead of the shadow of secrets. Every night, he told them stories of the brave mother and the fearless aunt who had died so they might live. And so, Sarah's legacy lived on, not just in the records of justice, but in the hearts of 2 children whose future she had fought to protect.